Yeah. Not the kind that'll do you any good, but
back and we replied, oh yeah,
Mary Layton's there.
this was easily the most dramatic campaign in
It's one of the things I know that I like to do.
Yeah. Not the kind that'll do you any good, but
back and we replied, yeah,
Mary Layton's there.
this was easily the most dramatic campaign in
Which is great.
Are we ready to start recording? Yeah. All right, why don't we get started?
Recording in progress.
Good evening. This is Wednesday, November 13th. This is a regular meeting of the Norwich Selectboard. I'm Pam Smith, the chair. I'm joined here in Tracy Hall by Mary Layton, vice chair, Priscilla Vincent, and our town manager, Brenda Duffy.
Yeah.
Roger Arnold.
Not the kind that'll do you any good, but
And we expect Marsha
and
Calloway
we replied,
shortly. So with
Yeah.
that,
Mary
I'd like to get
Layton's
started.
there.
this was easily the most dramatic campaign in
The approval of the agenda. Are we ready to start recording? Does anyone have any changes to the agenda? All right, why don't we get started?
Yes.
Recording in
I'd like
progress.
to, suggest that we add
Good evening.
an agenda item.
This is Wednesday, November 13th. This is a regular meeting of the Norwich Selectboard. I'm Pam Smith, the chair. I'm joined here in Tracy Hall by Mary Layton, vice chair, Priscilla Vincent, and our town manager, Brenda Duffy.
Yeah.
Roger Arnold.
Not the kind that'll do you any good, but
And we expect Marsha
and
Calloway
we replied,
shortly. So with
Yeah.
that,
Mary
I'd like to get
Layton's
started.
there.
The
this was
first
easily the
item
most
of
dramatic
business
campaign in
is the approval of the agenda.
Is this to just establish the agenda item?
Are we ready to start recording? Does anyone have any changes to the agenda? All right, why don't we get started? I'm fine with
Yes.
putting it-
Recording in
I'd like
progress.
to,
Maybe,
suggest that we add
Good evening.
an agenda
Head of
item.
correspondence. This is Wednesday, November 13th. This is a regular meeting of the Norwich Selectboard. I'm Pam Smith, the chair. I'm joined here in Tracy Hall by Mary Layton, vice chair, Priscilla Vincent, and our town manager, Brenda Duffy.
Yeah.
Roger Arnold.
Not the kind that'll do you any good, but
And we expect Marsha
and we
Calloway
replied,
shortly. So
to discuss.
with
Yeah.
that,
Mary Layton's there.
this was easily the most dramatic campaign in
Talk to
the
town
approval
council.
of the agenda.
Is this to just establish the agenda item?
Are we ready to start recording? Does anyone have any changes to the agenda? All right, why don't we get started? I'm fine with
Yes.
putting it-
Recording in
I'd like
progress.
to,
Maybe,
suggest that we add
Good evening.
an agenda
Head of
item.
correspondence. This is Wednesday, November 13th. This is a regular meeting of the Norwich Selectboard. I'm Pam Smith, the chair. I'm joined here in Tracy Hall by Mary Layton, vice chair.
See why Marsha likes shorthand. Okay, got it.
Right, great, okay. If there's no comments,
We don't have a second, I don't think.
yes, Priscilla did
Did,
second.
okay.
Yep.
Good.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Priscilla, how do you vote?
Yeah.
Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So it's 4 yes and Marcia is not present.
Right.
Okay. Right, great. So we'll move on to item number 2, which is the chair's report. We do have a written report in the packet this time. I'm not going to read it to you. I assume most people have already read it. I would just like to emphasize that it really makes it hard to run a meeting if people don't wait to be recognized by the chair. So I would encourage everyone to please wait to be recognized. Okay, the next thing, public comments for items not on the agenda. Do we have any public comments? I don't see any in the room. I see a hand went up on the screen. I'm not sure who, oh, it's Lily. Okay. Lily, do you want to go ahead?
You did. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry, I'm driving and my son is controlling the phone, so we'll hope the car speakers hold. I just wanted to say a public thank you to all of the volunteers who helped work at the general election last week. We had 44 volunteers working over the course of about 15 hours, and they did a great job. It was the smoothest election I've run so far. And I couldn't have done it without everybody who is so willing to come and work one of those shifts. So if you were with me last Tuesday, thank you very much. And if you're interested in volunteering, please reach out to me. That's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Lily. Okay. Marcia has just joined us. Okay. All right, the next item on the agenda is Select Board Handbook Review with the Conservation Commission. And I see we have several members here from the Conservation Commission. Is Craig here? Oh, you're stuck behind somebody over there. Do you want to come up and join us and introduce yourself? And maybe introduce all the members of your committee that are here with us.
Craig Lane, 72 Tigertown, Chair of the Conservation Commission. Al Scotland this year as well. Lindsay Putnam, Linwood Andrews, and Michael Lutz is on Zoom.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. I know you're still trying to get settled, Marcia. And since this is mostly your effort to put this together, I'll turn it over to you here in a moment. I just want to point out that if you're following along in the packet online, it's pages 62 and 63 in the packet. If you have the printed version of the handbook, it's pages 24 and 25. So Marcia, if you're ready, I'm ready. Okay. Hi, Craig.
Hi.
And everybody else.
Essentially, we're starting these conversations, as you know, and there's no real formula, but rather this is an opportunity to ensure that everybody knows what each group is doing. That's kind of the impetus of the handbook, and also so that there's a handy reference for folks so that they can look up charges and they can look up statutes. And it's an organic kind of document. It's going to be changing as we discover stuff and things change. And so we want everybody to know what their statutory responsibilities are. And this is so that everybody can review the charges. So it's also an opportunity to learn or discuss how you're connecting with other groups so that the town can take advantage of its expertise. And so we aren't all just working in silos inefficiently or, to different purposes. That said, not everybody has a charge. For those that do, we're going to review those. For people, and I'm kind of saying this because there's other people here that we're going to be talking to, I think, for other groups. We should also, we'll touch on the statutes and specifically any questions or ambiguities. And we'll also touch on the open meeting law requirements, but with the understanding that the Secretary of State's office is going to be providing municipalities with training for that, so that at this point, we should just be pointing you to the information. And most of that is on the website for the town, and it's also in the handbook. But we're reminding you that you have to publish your meeting minutes. There's statutory stuff in terms of how many days in advance before your meeting you publish an agenda, and that your meetings must be open to the public, and of course that you publish your minutes within the statutory timeframe. And I would just say, offering up Miranda and Heidi, they can give guidance about how all of that works. So turning to your particular one for the Conservation Commission, I note that I missed two statutes which should be on your page. One is about the creation of a Conservation Commission. It may be created at any time when the municipality votes to create one, or if the legislative body votes to create one. And also that it's one of those groups for which the legislative body can remove a member for just cause if it needs to happen. So I'd like to sort of start by talking about the rules. And I guess before we get into that, do you have anything that you want to add? Because you've got a charge, you've been doing this a long time. So, this is an opportunity to hear from you. But then I would like to talk about the statutory requirements for rules and the plethora of things that's allowed in the statute that you can be doing. So
Nothing came to mind. The description seemed to include all the things we think we are supposed to do: education of public and advisory on management of conserved lands, inventories, conservation.
okay.
And I encourage all the other commissioners to raise their hand and contribute if I forget something.
All right, go ahead.
I have a question for Marcia that I found confusing in the list of duties, that it appears that the Conservation Commission can receive grants, but not solicit them. So I'm wondering what little dance has to happen for any money to come to them. Just saying, okay?
That was on my list. And
That's
it-
on the list,
yeah.
okay.
on 24 VSA 4505, just get to where your page. Conservation Commission.
It's page 24.
Thank you. I think to some extent, this lies at the feet of the select board to figure out this stuff, because as you remember, Mary, we've sort of looked at the gift policy many times. But one way that let's go to this first. Under the powers and duties, if you look particularly at 24 VSA 4505, it is number 5. No. Yeah. Receive money, grants. I got to change glasses again. And receive gifts of land is number 6. But it's all by consent of the legislative body or by affirmative vote of the municipality. So essentially, I think, and that's number 6. Number 5 says it can receive grants from any source. And I think that's where it goes to us to say, we've got to get our gift policy in order so that we know how that's working and what people are allowed to do in terms of accepting gifts. One of the things that I added to this particular version of the handbook is on page 5, and it's under housekeeping guardrails. Basically, we need to have more conversations about things like, do we need insurance for certain activities that you might be doing? And it all kind of comes down to, I think, you have to run through the town manager's office. If you're looking at grants, if you're thinking this would be a good thing for us to do, we've got on the top of page 5 right now, a section about grants and donations. And all of that stuff, I think, is going to be monitored by the town manager's office. Budgets and reimbursements are in that section as well, because sometimes, you just want to be making sure that you understand how you're going to get money back if you expend it. And also, we're here in the budget season. What are you going to need for money? It all starts with the town manager. Does that answer your question?
Not really, because the way it's written, it looks like no one on the Conservation Commission could write a grant. It could solicit a grant.
Are you looking at number 5?
I believe so.
On page 5?
Doesn't it say it can receive?
Oh,
gifts and
you're
grants?
looking at the statute.
Right.
Right.
So how does that,
Well,
how hard and fast is that?
I mean, it's the statute. So
Right.
it says
So
they
we're taking it literally, like they cannot write a grant? Or is it just, as you say, monitoring? I can see why, especially with land, where you really want to be very careful if you have a gift of land, because it might have
Right.
a contamination on it or something like that.
right.
But I don't see the harm in writing the grants. I don't see the logic of that in the statute.
Well, I don't think we can second guess the statute, but I think what we need to do is look at the statute and say, it says that. And so let's talk to the town manager, because
he's going to be the guy that's administrating the grant, right? And he's probably going to come to us and say, they want a grant that's going to have matching funds. Do we have that money for matching funds? How do we want to do this? Just,
Right, so is this okay to keep this conversation going a little bit?
yeah, it's
Okay.
informative. Yeah.
There's also the time involved to administer, so the town manager may not have time to administer grants. But grants also might be very helpful to what the Conservation Commission is trying to do. But I'm just wondering, is that now, because of the statute, just shut down?
I wouldn't think it's necessarily shut down, but I think it makes you have a hard stop and come to the select board and say, so this is what we're doing. And, what if they want a grant to build an oil well? I'm just, dumb stuff. And we say, well, we think you should probably describe why that's going to help. How's it going to fit with Norwich? I just think you shouldn't look at the statute and say, that says absolutely not, because I'm not sure it does say absolutely not, but they can't, like, on their own, just go out and say, we're going to do X, Y, or Z.
So you're saying we're looking for communication about it, so it doesn't become a burden to the town manager's office.
Right.
But let's say that, there is a granting organization in the Upper Valley where the person expected a one-page letter. If it was anything else, she would not consider it. That would not be a burden, I wouldn't think. But you'd still want to have a communication about it, right?
Right. Remember what happened? We had a grant a few years ago.
We had another one
Right.
that was like that.
Right.
So you'd still want the communication,
I think so.
but that wouldn't be the time burden.
No, I think I'm just trying to intuitively think this through with everybody, but I think what you said is the nub of it. It's about communication. So that if you have a good idea, you bring that to the town manager's office, right? And he says, that's not a problem. It's not going to be any burden on the town. It's right.
Could the town manager delegate it back out so someone else can write it and administer it? Is that within the purview?
I would assume that would be the case, to have somebody.
That might unlock it, make it possible. Okay.
But shouldn't we just be thinking about this in terms of a big neon sign saying we want to communicate, right?
Yeah, I want us to be clear of the message that we're sending to these committees, that if they have a project they want to pursue, it's not that you can't pursue it, it's just that there's a process that we would like you to follow. Come to the town manager, present your idea, and then he can bring it to the board for approval. So we don't want you to feel like you can't go out after grants or donations and things, but it just needs to go through a process. One thing that jumped out at me here is grants and gifts received by the trustee of public funds shall be carried in a conservation fund from year to year to be expended only for purposes of this chapter.
Which one are you?
That's number 5. And it's the second sentence in number 5. And the conservation fund does not go through the trustee of public funds. It's one of the reserve funds in the town. So I'm wondering if we're doing this correctly. But that's something we can determine later. It jumped out at me.
I think that's why we're looking at this. And I think one thing that I've heard kind of repeatedly is sort of a frustration with statutes. And I think we have to follow statutes. Sine qua non, we just have to. But I also think that we have to talk about it, because what might look like it's a prohibition might just mean you've got to think about it in a way that makes it possible. So if you're not supposed to go get a grant, come and talk to the town manager and we figure out that grant. Also, the ancillary things that might be suggested by that grant.
Also, we need to look at who might be the signatory on the grant. It might be the town manager, so it would have to come through. I think it always is.
Hey.
Roger, sorry. I need to look up every now and then, don't I? Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. So
I don't, so I think like we're getting into, so I think there's the handbook and making sure that the Conservation Commission weighs in on their charge that is going to be accurately reflected in that handbook. And that's one item. I think what we're sort of talking about is how to effectively run an organization that has volunteers and professional staff, right? So, like, my question would just be, what are the financial procedures for the town of Norwich, and how are you asking volunteers to abide by these procedures, right? So, if it is $75 of perennials, I don't even expect, I imagine, I hope there's a financial policy that says I don't actually need to see a receipt for a purchase that is $75 or under. They can file for reimbursement, and that is that. But if it is an invoice for a construction of a vernal pool, then that is subject to a separate process. That's the purchasing policy. So I sort of hear what Marcia's saying. It's not just about like, you know, the facilitation of grants and gifts. It is, what are the processes that volunteers have to interact with the town to do their work? And so I think the town manager's office does this. So they just need to codify it and make clear to all of us, because there are some things I also want to hear about, but if it's consistent with a budgeted item, I probably don't need to hear about it. I just want to be grateful that we have a committee who does that work, right? So I don't know how we want to manage this conversation, but like anything about a organizational procedure or a financial policy that we don't know, we should just find out and just carry on with the handbook conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
I sort of think what we should do is keep a running list of things that
Yeah.
this points out.
Yeah.
So, you know, I put in, having been vetted by the town manager, the bit about the grants and contracts, but embedded in there are some nitty gritties that might need to be, you know.
Yeah, like how does a volunteer get a reimbursement for a purchase that is consistent with the budgeted item?
Well, it's on page 5, and I think the town managers will have the answer when they go to him, right? Right. And then I think the things that I think we really need to start drilling down on are the housekeeping things, you know, the things like programs. Do we need to have certain programs vetted? Do we need, what about websites? And this is all not, you know, I feel like we're getting into the weeds here, and we should be talking to you more about this. But for now, let me just say that I've listed some things under housekeeping on page 5 that I think the select board needs to put down on its to-do list. So the rules section 24 VSA 4504, and before I carry on, Pam Linwood has had her hand up for a while, so I don't know when.
Yes, I actually have written grants for the Conservation Commission. So it might make sense to go through an actual grant process that has occurred recently. I applied for several grants to the Norwich Women's Club. And the procedure that I was told was I should simply let her, Durfee, who was the town manager at the time, know that I was doing this. And I did it. And I was the one who signed on it. I wrote the grant application. I administered it. I carried out I was buying material to plant at the Milk Fry field area, and also some materials I needed for that, plants and other stuff. And in every circumstance, I had to pay out of pocket for anything that I ordered, and then I would seek reimbursement from the women's, well, actually from the town, and then they would seek reimbursement from the women's club. So it was kind of a convoluted process to get payment, but there's a reimbursement form that you fill out when you have had to pay for something. It was the bureaucracy of trying to get the town to pay for something was beyond belief. So I simply just paid for it myself and then sought reimbursement. because you have to set up accounts. It's just unbelievably complicated and annoying, to be honest. So that is the process by which grants have operated, at least since 2017, when I joined the Conservation Commission. And those are the only grants I believe that we've applied for.
Well, that's all good information, which is why we're doing this.
But am I correct in thinking that is the procedure from here on out? If I want to apply to the Women's Club this spring?
So I think as discussed, I think the process would be to talk to the town manager, say we're looking to do a grant, this is why we want to do it. You know, the complexity of the grant might be at play. I think the Women's Club is very straightforward. And likely you would say, yeah, that sounds like a great idea, go forth and do that. I think it's as simple as that. As far as the reimbursement, you're right, there's a whole process, but once a grant is kind of in the town coffers, then it's a little easier just to dispense the money out to the use that was made. So I think that would be how that would work, is we would get the grant monies and then you would say, okay, I spent X amount of dollars and be reimbursed for that out of that grant that's in that line.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want to go back to the rules section again, Marcia?
Yes. So 24 VSA 4504 is about rules, and it's very interesting that the Conservation Commission has that sort of specification, but it talks about how you would have a majority vote and annually elect a chair, a treasurer, and a clerk. Do you do that? Great. And then the times and place of the meetings, this paragraph B is basically a mini mirror of the open meeting law, and which I also think is fascinating because we have an open meeting law, but it's just sort of saying probably a quirk of timing when this was developed, but basically you have to abide by it. And of course you would have to abide by the amendments that came out in July. And they're a little bit more stringent for bodies that are non-advisory, like the select board, versus advisory ones, which are more like the Conservation Commission. And then C is you have to keep a record of transactions, which should be filed with the town clerk as a public record of the municipality. Yeah.
What's the definition of transactions there?
That's a very good question. I think it's pretty broad, don't you? So I would say that would be minutes and presumably anything that you're receiving in terms of money or spending. But again, I think that's probably a function of the town manager processes, right? And we could separate out the minutes. I don't know, are minutes normally just filed with the town clerk for all?
I believe they flow through the town manager's office and then they go down to the town clerk. So.
Okay. So since the statute particularly says that for these guys, I think we need to make sure that happens. And then again, I was going to talk about the activities, the plethora of activities that you could engage in. Do you want to talk about any things that you are doing or you think you should be doing? And I'm also particularly interested in how you're connecting with other commissions and committees, because that's part of, I understand from the statute, part of what you should be doing.
Yeah, I could list a lot of things we're doing, but I'm also interested in things we are doing or should be doing that are or are not in line with town priorities, which is listed in the document. Mm-hmm. And it's not immediately obvious to me what all the town priorities might be that we should follow to have projects about.
I think that's a fair statement. I think, in my humble opinion, I think it goes to what the select board has said it's going to spend money on in terms of, you know, like if we decided that we were going to do a Beaver Meadow project, right? In terms of a walkability thing or anywhere in town. That to me seems to involve the Conservation Commission. And so I think it's kind of on us if we're saying we're going to do something that we should make sure that you're kind of CC or, hey, did you see this, that we're going to do that? And then I think obviously the town plan, when those things are being developed, I think you should have a place at the table, right?
And we were, last time it happened, we worked with the planning commission. Historically, we had more interaction with development review than we've had recently. We have interaction with town manager's office, obviously, and public works
And I think.
and rec.
Okay. And I think it would be great, speaking for myself, but I hope the board agrees that you should bring ideas to us. Like, I see this problem, or we see this problem over here, and we think that deserves attention. And I don't know how that gets translated in terms of payment, but if it's going to cost a lot of money, but it's something that we should be budgeting for. But we can't do it all, so that's why you guys are out there.
I think emerald ash borer management is a good example of that.
This is what?
Emerald ash borer management is a good example.
Yeah. Huge.
Marcia, I see Roger said his hand up. So Roger, did you want to go ahead and say something?
I have a couple questions, if that's okay.
Okay, go ahead.
So one of the things I'm interested is like what I was talking about before, like an organization that relies a lot on volunteer work, right? And how to, bring volunteers and committees into like an organization with paid staff. So invasive species management, as far as I know, is really just is designated to volunteers around the Conservation Commission. And so I guess my question would be, how much of that needs to, do you see as going beyond a volunteer activity? Like, so what is the sort of the current, I guess, workload, if you will, of invasive species management? And then how much do you foresee needing paid labor, right, to help with that, like make that staff work as part to complement volunteer work? So that's one question. And then trails, right? Trail work is like continually complex. And right now it seems like it's a work group of a subcommittee that, and then of course.
Oh, you froze up. You're freezing, Roger.
I had the same question. How do you see trail work needing to be brought into like town affairs, right? So in short, the question is the volunteer work that is done through a trail subcommittee and the conservation committee, how much of that needs additional or professional support? I see that some towns are actually hiring trail coordinators, part-time trail coordinators, right? For their robust networks. So any sort of 2 cents on that would be, I think, helpful for future strategic planning.
Okay, thank you, Roger. So did you understand his questions? What kind of support do you need, either from town staff or from contractors, to do some of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, invasive plant problems is an interesting one there, and a big problem that's at a scale that small groups of volunteers can't really tackle. And so probably discussions about policies that limit the spread of them, or projects that tackle particularly bad ones in bad spots, would certainly be something that would be good to interact more town-wide with.
And then he had another question about the trails subcommittee.
Yeah, the trail subcommittee is a very active trail working group, and they have many other volunteers beyond who's on the subcommittee. They have a big network that every month there's a work day and they'll work on some trail. So they're really good at getting to trail work.
Do you feel like you're doing fine with that group, that you have that network and not needing town support? Well, I guess there was a project here recently, some corrective work up on Ladue Road that the town staff did help with, the DPW.
Yeah.
Occasionally it happens, but it's not a regular occurrence that
right.
need ongoing support.
Right. I mean, there are times, and DPW has dumped gravel and stuff for us through recent history too, if it's needed in this spot.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how much communication do you have between the trails and the bigger group?
A lot. There are two members from the Conservation Commission who are also on the Trails Subcommittee. And it's a reported item every month in our meeting.
I see Linwood's hand is up again. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, Roger, I would say with respect to invasive species management, there are really very few to no residents of the town who are interested in volunteering to work on that kind of problem. So we rely on members of the commission to do that work themselves, or we have to hire out to a contractor to do that work. And there are certainly areas in town and varieties of invasive plants that are increasingly a threat to the biodiversity and forest health that we have here. So I would just put my 2 cents in with that.
I would, can I just follow up?
Sure, go ahead, Roger.
I mean, I know, yes, I know too. Like, so we actually had a sort of a business in nearby who was awarded a grant and like did this for a bunch of neighbors around. And so it was, as a resident, there's a programmatic need, right? I didn't know what isn't an invasive. And so that was helpful and interesting for me to know. But then the next thing is like, would I remove it myself? And, it's not high, I confess, on the priority list of my home management, right? But nonetheless, I see the community at large might need. That's why a community at large tackles these kinds of questions when a homeowner, for lots of different reasons, can't. So I would argue that the expertise of the Conservation Commission on invasive species management needs to be brought further into planning for the town, right? I'm not saying it has to be the DPW department, but the town should maybe take that on more, because emerald ash borer is an invasive species, right? And apparently not the most pernicious according to VPR, right? So anyway, I digress. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Marcia, we're going a little bit beyond what amount of time I thought we would allow for each of these committees. So I don't know how much more you would like to cover, but we should probably try to wrap up soon.
In terms of having something productive here, you're comfortable with the way your page looks at the moment, I think. And I think it would be helpful for the group, if based on this conversation, if you could come up with sort of a triage list of, things that need attention the most. Like, what's the most horrific other than emerald ash borer, which we know about, invasive that we maybe want to tackle, or whatever it is that you think is a problem. Could be water. I mean, we all know that's a huge issue, but maybe bring that back to us when you have it.
Both that and looking closer at the document will be on an agenda item on our meeting.
Which document?
Looking at the handbook document.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone, for coming.
Just for our budgeting purposes, so you're looking to get a level funded 8,000.
We submitted.
Do we have solid waste?
Yeah, I think we do. I see Andy back there. I don't know. And Jordan's here. Andy, introduce yourself and your committee members.
Okay. Hi, Andy Shear, Chair of the Solid Waste Committee.
Excuse me, just for a second. I want to point out to everyone that the pages in the handbook for the Solid Waste Committee online are 88 and 89. If you have the printed version, it's pages 50 and 51. So everyone can follow along. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, I did miss the beginning. How have people been sort of presenting? I missed it.
Shall I? Yeah. Well, first introduce the members of your committee who are here with us tonight, if you would, and then I'm going to turn it over to Marcia to lead the discussion.
Sure. I have Jordan Mullen here, who's the vice chair, and he's the only other person.
Okay. All right. Great. All right. Thank you for coming. So Marcia's going to lead the conversation.
Hi, Andy.
Hi.
So as you know, we're just starting these conversations, and the first go around was to sort of get something on paper and then to reach out to everybody and ask for a charge. And so you sent back a charge, and I think you've seen that and you're pretty comfortable with what we've got listed.
Yeah.
So what we're doing really is using this as an opportunity to talk to people and find out, you know, what you've been doing, how it fits in with what the town's doing. Ask about things like, you know, money, do you need budgets or whatever? And understand that this handbook is intended to be sort of a go-to for the committees, but also people in town who want to understand, well, what does the solid waste committee do? And lots of people say, I've heard questions to me, well, why does that happen? Well, there's a statute that says that something should happen in some cases, not all cases. But so tonight, what we'll do is just briefly touch on the whole open meeting law thing, which is basically going to be discussed through the Secretary of State's office. They're going to give training to municipalities, and then, you know, whatever we learn will be passed on. But all of the new amendments are on the website for the town manager's office. They're also now in the handbook, so it's easy to find out. And the things that you've been doing in terms of posting your meetings pursuant to, you know, the timelines by statute, doing your minutes on time, all of that sort of thing. It's the same sort of stuff. So we just like to say, we've said, if you need anything, ask Heidi or Miranda. They can help answer your questions. So I did find a statute that is applicable to you, which is the landfill disposal requirements. That's 10 VSA 6621A. And presumably that's the kind of stuff that you're posting flyers for and trying to help out with, right? So,
well, a lot of the stuff is actually already in place. It's been there for a while, but there are, there are laws now that prohibit batteries from going into the landfill. So as an example, so they have collections set up through the office where the staff there can just receive them, and then they're packaged and shipped off accordingly. So a lot of these things are kind of already in place. I'd say the focus of our work this year has really been more on, moving outside of some of this stuff where, we're trying to look at like styrofoam. So it's a lot of collections and community volunteering to get that done. We've put in clothing bins, trying to look for some of the gaps in what is offered through our transfer station and try to sort of broaden, different avenues for things to get recycled or reused.
did you say there's a clothing bin for recycling?
Well, not recycling, just reuse. So
Reuse.
yeah, so there's one in Daniel's parking lot, one in the St. Barnabas Church. Those were put in. They take a little bit more variety of things than, say, Listen Center.
Mhm.
So that's an example.
So I guess this is the time for you to tell us what you think is missing, the time for the board to say, we think it would be good if you did X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, it's interesting. I feel like the position of this committee, we're sort of in between a little bit, the DPW and we have a physical site on, on town land where, we have the transfer station, and there's staff there who are working. And so, we're trying to work sort of within the realm of the DPW a little bit and trying to, find things that are helpful and useful for them. But, they certainly have had a lot of things already in place. And so I think, like I said, we're just trying to look for different ways that we can sort of contribute towards the reducing of landfill use.
Mm-hmm.
I see that you have provided us with a description of some of the things that you would like funded
Yes.
through an appropriation for the solid waste committee. So I'm seeing $400 for design and printing and installation of new signage, $250 to cover printed flyers, handouts, and posters, and then $200 for miscellaneous expenditures.
Yeah.
So that
I assume this is something that you're incorporating into.
Yeah, so what I think we've talked about the request from the solid waste committee. So we'll have in the budget line items for each of these, I think is how we are anticipating doing this.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Has their own allocation that they can use.
And they can live within their little budget rather than putting a pool out of one pool of money and they're all competing for that pool of money. I think it'd be better to each committee have their own budget. So I appreciate that.
In regards to that, like, so how would one access those funds? Would it be, kind of still continuing to go through the DPW, go through the head there for, at least in our case, or?
You could probably just come right to the town manager if this will be done differently than it has in the past.
Okay.
It's actually part of the DPW's budget. So
okay.
I think in this case, it would just be through me.
Okay, great.
Marcia, go ahead.
So do you feel that the intersection between what you're doing and the DPW is working? Is there anything that do you feel there's too much overlap?
I don't think so. I mean, I think there's certain things that the DPW and the staff can focus on. And I think we've been able to broaden out a little bit in terms of what we're able to sort of look at and, kind of see, is there a gap in sort of the collections of certain materials, or, we're able to provide volunteer support for things. But we certainly need to work in conjunction with them as well. Be like, well, we want to put up some signage to make it clear for people who are bringing their recyclables. So, we certainly have to go, working within, have, Chris say like, yes, that looks good, or, we'd like to see this. So I think it's a good partnership. Just trying to get the financial piece now, and this will certainly help in sort of going in that direction.
And my final question is about the piece of basically costs in terms of the fee schedule. Your input for that, do you find that, I mean, are you doing it regularly? Because I don't think that we see it too often here.
Well, actually, they were very helpful this summer because we were looking at the rates and what we were going to change, and they did a real nice analysis of what that was and a recommendation. So
thank you.
I think that's something we should do every year around April or May to gear up for the July 1 beginning of the next fiscal year, and whether we're going to have any change in the fees.
Yeah. This was the first year that we'd been asked to do it. So I think, but I think it went pretty well, and we were able to kind of, get some things from Barry and just get some things from the financial office that we could sort of look and see where, where were the major expenses, kind of get some of the historical background.
That was Brennan's suggestion, and I think it's a really good idea for you to have that hands-on experience of where do these fees come from, and why do we have that fee for that particular?
Yeah, what are our expenses for, in certain situations. So that, that's very helpful.
Good. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, Roger, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
I mean, yes, thanks. I think it would be interesting, like as a board and, as a town to have a conversation with our town manager more about when a committee is performing something programmatic and when a committee is like seeking to influence or change operations of town. I mean, I think it's fine to weigh in and design and create signs for the transfer station, but I also think that the transfer station is capable of doing that themselves under the leadership of the DPW director. And I'm far more interested in a committee who teaches people regularly on site about recycling and reducing the purchasing of black plastic or whatever the campaign might be. I mean, I actually think the energy committee is like a really good model for sort of like programmatic like outputs that like educate residents and in turn influence like operations. I'm not sure, like I want the town manager to weigh in on the Casella contract. I don't want a committee to do that. If he designates it to a committee, that's his business and I support the town manager in that. But again, we should talk as a group. When is a committee doing something programmatic with a charge, or when is a committee looking to change or work with town operations? I think the solid waste committee needs to be more programmatic and less affecting operations of our transfer station. So that's the purpose of, I think we should, if we're going to talk about like committee charges and do a handbook, we should talk about it. So anyway, thanks.
It's on the to-do list.
Right, and as far as the signs, you haven't really presented any kind of a proposal of what kinds of signs you would want, so I would hesitate to assume what they might be. But certainly printed flyers and things would be educational,
Sure, yep.
and hopefully the signs would be too.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm not going to jump to the conclusion that you're trying to subvert the efforts of the DPW staff at the transfer station.
No, and I think we, you know, there hasn't been, people have asked for them, you know, there's, you know, we'll get, you know, the guys just being like, no, you know, no wrapping paper at Christmas time, you know, so I think having a more formalized something up there to establish that, I think would be helpful. I mean, if the DPW said, oh, we're going to do it, I mean, that'd be totally fine. Actually, there was an incident where people had left some paint, and there's a statewide paint care program. You know, they left some like glaze or some non-acceptable material. And so, you know, in conjunction with the Greater Upper Valley Solid Waste District, they were able to get a sign, you know, that the state provided and post it up and say, you know, these are the allowable things. So if there was, you know, if the DPW wanted to do that, I mean, by all means, that'd be fine. You know, we just saw this as a need, you know, kind of in terms of educational, sort of be clear about what is acceptable and what's not. And so that was sort of the reasoning behind, you know, going.
Right. And some of the signs might be advertising some program that you're running or whatever.
Events, you know, we had a styrofoam collection, we put up something, you know, we filled, you know, 3 box trucks full of, I mean, you were there, right?
Yes,
So
I was there.
styrofoam. So we got really great advertising, and the people of Norwich were one of the largest contributors towards that. So, you know, they're a really conscientious group of citizens. So I think, you know, having those posters is, you know, certainly part of that, for that,
Okay,
raising awareness.
right. Anything else, Marsha?
So maybe this is just a good time to have conversations when you're talking about the budget with the town manager about, you know, the lanes, what the DPW can do, what they are happy to have you do, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know,
Just that's more efficient. It gives you more scope. If there's something that they want to do, it could give you more scope to do other things.
Roger, did you have something else you wanted to contribute?
No, I said, I was agreeing with Marsha's point.
Okay, all right. Any other questions or comments? All right, well, we'd like to thank you for coming.
Thanks for
thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for all the work you do.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Thanks.
I have to ask, do you have anything for fabric recycling?
That's one of the hardest things. Unfortunately, no. Even the textile bins, you know, they have a frequently asked questions, and they're not able to take it. So I don't know what to do with it.
Crazy.
It's a bit of a mystery. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so now we're going to move on to the Energy Committee, and for those following along in the packet online, it's page 75 of the packet, and in your printed handbook, it's page 37. Okay, would you like to introduce yourself and introduce the members of your committee, please?
Sure. Hi, I'm Eric Rentz, the chair of the Energy Committee. We got Tom Griggs, Brad Bubble, we've got Linda Gray, and then we have Charles Lindner on the Zoom.
Okay, good. All right. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Marsha to lead the conversation.
You heard my intro twice before, did you?
Yeah, it worked a little bit differently on each one of those, right?
Right. I mean, basically for you, you don't have any typically statutory requirements, right? But basically you've got to follow the open meeting law. There's that page 5 of the handbook that goes over grants and reimbursements and the guardrails. The guardrails are something that we've already had conversations about in terms of just checking to see if we need insurance coverage for anything or if our coverage is going to be sufficient. I know one of the things that I think is like an elephant on the table is websites. So there's lots of independent kind of websites that are for groups representing the town, but there's also a town website. And I think that's a conversation that, you know, we have to have at some point with the town manager about how we want to do that and who puts what content up there and who worries about what content is up there, all that kind of stuff.
But that's just the kind of thing that we wanted to say, let's have conversations about things so that everybody's aware and we don't run into any difficulties.
Sure. Yeah, I saw in reading through the handbook, I definitely saw the websites being called out. And I know that's a conversation, happy to have that. What would be the best place to have that?
Well, I mean, it would seem to me that if you have a particular sort of, I'm hoping on my to-do list, we're going to be talking about certain things like websites. And so it would be on an agenda and we'd be sort of talking, inviting people to come if you have concerns about your website or something, or maybe in the perfect world, we'll end up with a town website that can accommodate everything, you know, which could be good and bad. But basically, if you want to get on an agenda because you've got an idea, you talk to the town manager, you know, he'll talk to the select board chair, whoever that is at the time, and they get it on the agenda.
The other thing I wanted to interject here too was there may be times that the Energy Committee does things that we should be concerned about liability coverage.
That's,
yeah.
And so
we had that conversation earlier when they were doing e-bike stuff. And
right.
So they went to the town manager and council looked at the
coverage and, you know, things were made okay. So I think the message is we just go to the town manager.
I think
the town manager.
Yes, I know. Yeah, we definitely got that. We got the message from the e-bike situation. We'd had a regular program that we had done, and then one year there were concerns brought up. We changed the event, and then going forward, when we've had events that could have liability, we have sent them over to the town manager's office. I'm thinking about the window dressers events that we do annually.
Well, I mean, energy is a hot topic, right? And so I think, again, communication. So as we're going through whatever, hopefully when we are going through stuff about Tracy Hall, right? People should be talking and you should be sort of notified. We're doing this right now. And also it'd be interesting to know how you're interacting with the IREC coordinator, although I think it has a different name now, doesn't it?
The shared energy coordinator, yes. We have a representative on the steering committee of the shared energy coordinator, and then we interact with him pretty regularly. I think that would be a great place for us to try to solidify what the relationship between the shared energy coordinator, our group, Brendan, the select board should be. I think it's a place where we can there's some fruit to harvest there in coordinating.
So when you looked at your charge, that's okay.
Yeah, it seems that the charge is the statement of purpose from the charge that was from, 6/27/2018. And that seems fine to me to be in the handbook.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, you know, as we move forward and things change, charges can change, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think probably the select board is looking to you to tell us, we think this should be changed, right? Or we have a concern about something.
Okay.
It's all about communication. So is there anything that right now you think we wish that the select board was helping us with this?
Well, actually, before we talk that, I would love to get this 5 members, 7 members thing figured out.
Okay. So it was in the June 27th, 2018 select board minutes. Membership, at least 5 members, Norwich residents or property owners. And you've got what, 7?
Yes.
Okay. So what do you want?
Well, I think that 7 members has worked fine for us. I think that there's definitely the ability for us to do more, but I wouldn't want to have fewer. I wouldn't want to have fewer than 5 members. But I think the question keeps coming up. So if we need to have a certain number, then 7 seems to be an appropriate number if that suits the select board.
Okay, I see Linda has her hand up.
But I do want to note that Eric has in 2018, after that select board meeting where they amended the charge, at that meeting, they amended they set the number of members at 7. And we have a copy of the summary from Miranda in July 2018 saying, here's what the select board agreed. So I just want you guys to know that in 2018, the select board made it 7. And so that's why we've done it. And if you need the documentation, we have it. So, you know, it's up to you guys whether you want to keep it.
Yeah.
It looks like Roger is raising.
Roger, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think the theme that I keep wondering if anyone else is interested in is, like, again, how are volunteers interacting with a professional organization, right? And so I think we've heard that the 2 other committees, conservation and the solid waste, have a very direct relationship with a staff member, right? And we hear that that staff member may or may not then communicate the conversations back to the town manager. So I believe that that happens a little bit with the not IREC coordinator. And so I'm interested in a committee relationship where the town manager, right, with his staff who often take part in these committees, you know, provide directives to the committee. So I think right now committees do have a charge, they take on initiatives, we hear about it in some way, form or another, and then it becomes a part of the functions of the town. But wouldn't it be kind of wonderful if the town manager with the IREC coordinator developed an energy goal and then worked on it with the energy committee as sort of people on the ground? So I think we really just need to be really thinking about, like, how the staff can be sort of using the work of volunteers in a meaningful way. I don't think people volunteer because they're just looking for something to do. I think they want to create, you know, meaningful work. So I would want to know more about, like, when the IREC coordinator meets with the town manager and talks about what the energy committee talks about, what does our town manager think about that? And, like, how is he bringing it into the functionings of the town? So we should start asking these kinds of questions when we work with our town manager and he works with the staff. Does that make sense?
Put it on the to-do list.
Okay.
So,
Right, go ahead.
going back to the number of people, I pointed it out because there were 2 different things. So I think if it was actually voted, then Miranda would just change she's keeping the grand schedule of who's who and what they're doing. And then they post open positions. So I think it's you're not having subcommittees right now, but when the select board appoints people, the information goes to the town manager's office and they're keeping a master Excel spreadsheet. And there's going to be an extract of that posted on the town website so that anybody can look and see who's on there. It helps everybody in town to know who's doing what and when there's opportunities to apply for things. So I would say talk to Miranda.
Well, it sounds like you have 7 and 7 was approved. So 7 it is. And then if you lose somebody, you would post for an open position.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other concerns? Roger.
Cool. 7 people. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. If you don't have any other concerns, I think. Any other questions or comments for the Energy Committee? Linda, go ahead.
One thing that I see in your copy is that you have like you say, budget, no. But in actuality, the Energy Committee for a lot of years has had a budget of about $1,500. And so it's not a statutory thing, but anyway, so I just wanted to highlight that on this handbook version seems inaccurate.
Okay, this isn't set in stone. This is just, I couldn't see one right off the bat.
Oh, fine, okay.
It's under town manager, or town manager's office.
Yeah, 1,800.
It's
And
1,800, yeah.
And I did see the solid waste submittal for budget for next year, and I see the request to have budget requests in by September, which were passed. So we can have that as a discussion item for making it a little bit clearer what would be requesting budget in the future.
If you think it be 1,800, we could just put that in there. If you think that's going to change up or down, then yeah, I guess come back to us as quick as you can, because we're trying to lots of numbers now.
Yeah, we'll add it as an agenda item for the next meetings.
I think the budget last year was 1,800, and I remember that you didn't spend anywhere near that. It was like $75 or something.
We did not spend that much. I think there's a little bit of, there's a changing of the guard of chairs and we dealt with that a little bit more, but we'll have a little bit more comprehensive look at what we want.
And if you could outline some of the areas where you think you might need funds and
Exactly.
yeah, so that we don't just say $1,800 and we have no idea what you might be doing with it. So that would be good to have some kind of specificity in there, whether it's flyers or whatever.
I see that as an item to come back on. It would be great. As this Tracy Hall, I did see a future topic of talking about the level 2 energy assessment from the MERP program. If that is discussed, it would be great if we get contact so we can come in and provide any insights that we have.
Should just have like a checklist of things, for these issues, if they're going on the agenda, these committees need to be invited.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean,
go ahead, Roger.
I was just agreeing. I think yes, committees can do reporting, we can read their minutes, but it's just I think if there is a staff member is working to shepherd a committee through shepherd or attends the meeting or effectively staffs the committee, then they'll be able to do better reporting to the town manager, and the more likely their work is integrated into the affairs of the town. I just feel like committees are used as added value, and I think they should be used as part of the workforce of the town. And I think it's just a matter of developing processes. I guess I'm beating that point to the pulp.
Right. Well, we have a lot of talent in town and we should be using it. Okay. Any other questions or comments for the Energy Committee? Seeing none, I thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Moving along, the next item on the agenda is appointing a zoning administrator. And I see Jan is here. So, what's that?
Plug?
Yes, I see Stephen is here as well. So Jan?
Sure. I would first introduce Stephen True, who is there and can talk with you as you wish and at break and so forth. But for the sake of kicking off the conversation, I would report from the Planning Commission meeting last night that the Planning Commission unanimously approved to nominate Stephen True as the zoning administrator for the town of Norwich. So that, from a procedural point of view, that nomination now puts it on to the select board to approve or appoint him as the ZA and take over for Kyle, who was the interim.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you, Jan. And Stephen, welcome.
Thank you.
We've heard your name before, but this is the first time we've had you here in the meeting.
Correct.
Thank you for coming.
Happy to be here.
Does anyone have any questions for Stephen before we proceed? Any comments? Mary, go ahead.
Why do you have a particular interest in Norwich? Or maybe you don't, but, you know, it's
I
a
have
small town, you know, it's got this little.
I have a particular interest in municipal planning and zoning.
Okay, generally.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
On different scales, like sometimes town, sometimes city, or.
I've only worked for municipalities, not any cities. So without knowing, I can't answer that question, but I think that would be exciting too.
All right, thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? John?
I have one comment, John McCabe. We had a development review board meeting, Stephen came, it went very smoothly.
Good.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Thank you for contributing that comment. Okay, Marcia, go ahead.
So I'm just interested in, you've had a first blush look at the place. What do you think needs to be done first?
Well, all positive. I think have had opportunity to meet both municipal panels. They're both effective groups. There is, there are some modifications, I think, some modernization that might be appropriate to talk about at an early stage. But it operates very well. The office is, Pam is fantastic. I think we're offering a quality service to the residents, and I'm looking forward to improving that.
Super.
Thank you.
Computers?
What's that? No, I don't need a computer. This, though, should be in the dictionary of under the definition of contraption. This thing, but yeah, no, I mean, everything is good.
Good.
Brendan's been very helpful. Everyone's been very helpful. So happy to be here.
Welcome to Norwich.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, good. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move to appoint Stephen True as the Norwich zoning administrator.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Okay, Marcia, thank you. All right, any other comments or questions? Jan, is that your hand up?
Yeah, I would just like to say, having had our first planning commission meeting last night with a full-time staff member present, it was a wonderful change from the 18 months I've been chair without staff. It changes the entire tenor of the monthly meetings and our ability to get work done and be able to delegate and then have things brought back to us. So I'm really looking forward to being able to accelerate some progress in the planning commission.
Great. Okay, thank you. All right, any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, unanimous. Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
Congratulations.
thank you. My door is always open, and I would, I'm happy to help and love to talk. So please stop by.
Will do. Thank you. Okay. What did I do with my agenda? Okay, number 8. We have a request for an expenditure from the police chief. And that was in our packet, along with his memo, along with the request form for departmental spending. Does anyone have any questions on this particular request? Brendan, did you have anything you wanted to contribute, or?
No, I think the memo and the form were pretty straightforward.
Okay. All right. Seeing no questions or comments, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the expenditure of $5,345 from Fund Number 11, Police Cruiser Fund for fire extinguishers, flares, and other necessary accessories for 2 new cruisers.
Right, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Was that your motion?
It was.
Okay.
If I could just make a comment, I'm particularly quiet tonight because I have no voice. It doesn't mean I'm not enthusiastic.
You're a trooper for even showing up, not feeling well. Thank you. Okay, all right, so we have a motion and a second. Seeing no questions or comments, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Priscilla? Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, unanimous. Okay, and then we also have a request for transfer of funds from the chief, which is also a memo here in our packet. To transfer the funds, the proceeds from the sale of a 2013 Ford Taurus. Any questions or comments on this? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the transfer of $2,325 received from the sale of a 2013 Ford Taurus Interceptor from the general fund to Fund 11 Police Cruiser Fund.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. All right, seeing no questions or comments. Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Priscilla?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Marcia, how did you vote?
Yes.
Priscilla? And Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, unanimous.
For the screen, can you say she voted yes?
Oh, she put her hand up.
Okay.
Yeah. She's struggling to talk. Okay. That brings us to number. Did I?
10, I think.
Number 10. Okay, the operating FY26 operating budget summary.
Yeah.
That was in the packet.
And we've got to reorder down here. Just added one more here.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a motion that goes to that. It's just here. Copy here.
Okay, so we have a memo from Barry Rosalinda, our finance director, to Brennan, and outlining what's in the proposed budget. And then we have a spreadsheet that gives us breakdown by department. Are there any questions or comments on this? Priscilla?
This will help. I want to thank Barry. I was going through this trying to match up what we're doing now with what this is, and I couldn't figure out what constituted operations, but maybe I'm being overly picky. Has been a comment that we're being killed, and I can't do anything about it, by the increase in benefits costs. They're just 57%. And it's tough when you're trying to hold the budget down.
Right.
So if I may, I think Barry is on the line. I just put the final page there of the memo up, so people can kind of look at that as we talk. And so what we've done to get to this point is we've had multiple meetings with each of the departments, and we've provided them the guidance that we wanted to see no more than a 6% increase for this year from last. Yeah. And sharpened pencils and basically come in with a budget which is a total of, I think it's 4 point. Unfortunately, my home screen is blocking my way here. So about 4.5% increase overall in the operating budget. And this is not taking into account the capital budget that is presented there at the bottom of the spreadsheet. But tonight we were just going to talk about the operating budget. So the highlighted percent change there on row 12 is looking at each of those departments, and the highlighted cells are those that were not able to come in under 6%. And all of those departments were made aware that that might require some additional discussion with the select board if you so choose. But as you can see, the majority of the budget increases are under 6%. Some of them are even negatives from last year based on various factors. So I was very appreciative of Barry's work. Certainly she's created, again, really a very complex spreadsheet with a lot of connections here that I certainly don't have the expertise to explain, but she's got a great handle on it. And so there's backup for all of this. But I think what we were hoping was, again, with the possible exception of the highlighted departments that were over 6, that the board would be willing to say, thank you, that was what we had asked you to do on the operating side, and we can kind of move forward from here. If people did want to take a look at some of those individual departments to kind of better understand why the 6% was not attainable, we could set up a time with department heads to come in and kind of talk about that probably at the next regular meeting was my thought. But again, it's kind of up to the board to provide guidance here for that. So I'll leave that as a question of, are people understanding what's being presented? Are people interested in further review of the departments that were a little higher than the 6% threshold? And I guess the understanding that right now we're at 4.52% increase, which is again below the threshold that we were working towards. And Barry is on. If you had anything I missed there, Barry, this would be a great time to explain anything more.
Excuse me. Yes, I think it's just important that people realize at the bottom of that spreadsheet, the committee information, that people talked about tonight with their budgets, that those dollar amounts are not in the operating budget as it stands right now. And then the considerations, these are things that Brennan has brought up at previous meetings. Anticipated monies would be needed for those items in that consideration category. So there has not been money added to the budget for those expenditures.
And if I could just add to that, so those considerations could be potentially operational expenses, or they could be potentially coming out of the capital budget that is already, we have monies set aside for certain things. And I think I can tell you we got some very good news in the last week. So we had been talking about the municipal match for the Hemlock Road project that we said has already been obligated. And then we have the major culvert work that has not been completely finalized and obligated, but we have an idea of what that cost is going to be. It's about $2.3 million. So initially we were talking about having to have a municipal match of 12.5% of that. So we knew FEMA was going to be committing to 75%. The state was going to kick in 12.5%. The municipality would be responsible for 12.5%. So that's about $300,000 that we were factoring we were going to have to find this year. Just in the last week, we learned that FEMA is actually going to be kicking in 90%. So they have increased the amount that they're going to be able to fund for these projects. The state is going to kick in at 7.8%. So that means the town right now, we're expecting 2.2% of that $2.3 million. So it's basically saving us $150,000. And we're looking at about $52,000 now is what we're going to need to kind of budget for the match for the projects.
And that's for both projects?
It's for both projects.
What did you say, 50?
52,000 approximately is what we're anticipating.
Mary, you had a question?
Yeah, I think that's fantastic news. I'm wondering what next year will bring. If, FEMA being a federal agency, if we might see a boomerang, but we'll just have to see.
Well, yeah, once the funds are obligated, and I believe this
is probably fine.
Is locked. Yeah.
Right.
Who knows what future disaster we may have to deal with.
Disaster, both.
Yeah.
Physically, but then whatever our government is willing to throw our way. our federal government or not.
So just to continue on that topic. So Barry and I looked over kind of the capital designated fund, categories that we have. And we located the Operational Performance and Development Fund as being created with an idea that you would be able to contribute to grant matches. We currently have $87,000 in that fund. So if we took 52,000 out of that, it would deplete it pretty significantly, but that would be money that we could say, we have it here. And then the discussion, maybe as we get into the capital budget, would be, do we want to in this year try to replenish some of that again? So it's not just, we're not taking it all out and not replacing it this year at some level. So not quite ready to make a recommendation on what that might be, but I think that would be useful. I see Roger has his hand up, so maybe he would like to ask a question, and then I was going to talk more about the other considerations.
Okay, Roger, go ahead.
Well, I have a couple questions about sort of what's being presented, but so maybe you'll address them, so I don't have to go now.
Okay.
Right.
So again, just going down the line there, the Moore Lane Bridge. So this is probably a good chance to say, we are hoping to have the initial report from Stantec for the next board meeting. We've asked them to participate in that meeting, and we hope that will lead to some public discussion once kind of we've published the draft of the report that they've created with the different options. I would love to hear, different people in the community have been very vocal about what they'd like to see done or different ideas. And this will be the chance at the next meeting to come to the meeting and speak. So we'll try to broadcast that out a little bit more. But
we talked about maybe having a semi-public hearing on it.
Yeah,
I love public comment.
I think, again, this will be the time for anybody that wants to talk about the Moore Lane Bridge and what we can do, to talk about it. So, yeah, however we want to set that up.
I would like to suggest that maybe we need to do something also, maybe on a weekend, because I know that there are some people who can't come on Wednesday night.
Yeah, well, Stantec, unfortunately, we're a little bit beholden to them as a consultant that would be able to work through that. So obviously it won't be perfect for everybody's schedule, but that if we can get the word out at least early that when this discussion will happen and let people know, I think.
So we're talking about getting the packet out on the 22nd, and then we're having our meeting on the 26th, the day early because of the Thanksgiving weekend.
Right.
So there won't be a lot of time for people to absorb what's in the report if we hold back until the 22nd to publish that. We will
get it out as soon as we can, but we don't have the report yet. And I will caveat that there's a chance that maybe they're going to miss their deadline, but that's what they've told us.
If we get it early, maybe we could also put out that we would welcome public comments at that meeting, assuming that all the timing works out on this.
Well,
Marcia,
could we have something or consider it if there's enough interest? We could tape, obviously, the presentation from the meeting that we have that Stantec attends, and then we could maybe have a weekend thing where we play it and they don't come, but we're here to listen.
You could do whatever you wish. It's going to be Thanksgiving in the middle of budget season, so
right, that's true. Yeah,
it might not be the greatest time to.
Well, it also depends on what the timing is of what we're going to do. If this is something that we don't have to do until
I think
April, May, June,
I mean, we want to move quickly, I think.
But this is also something that you need to put out an RFP. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a kind of a linear steps here. So we need to hear from Stantec about what their initial thoughts are with some options. We'd like to hear from the community about whether there are other ideas that they haven't considered that they should. Then we have to get a final report from them that would encompass all of that. Then I think really it's going to come back to the select board to say, okay, what does the town want to do here? Which option should we choose? How do we move forward? And then, you know, in a perfect world, we pick an option, we get an RFP out, we start work, you know, potentially in the spring or summer. But we don't even know what we're doing yet. So
how are we budgeting for this?
well, that's a question. So again, designated funds, we have $716,000 in the bridge fund. So that is a 716,000. So that is a fairly significant amount of funds there. And we also want to look at, when we get our audited surplus, is there anything additional that we would want to potentially ask the voters to approve to go into that project? So I guess that's kind of where I think we are at the moment.
Okay.
But anyway, the highlight there is that we should have, again, something to look at here in the next couple of weeks and be able to start having some real dialogue about it. The Tracy Hall project, likewise, we've been told we were going to see the architect's report fairly soon. I don't want to put a specific date on that, but they've gotten the energy audit results. They've talked to the other specialists that they're consulting with, and so we might have that. Again, it's all coming to a head at the end of the year in the middle of the budget, but that might be something we could look at early in 2025, you know, when we get into a little quieter time of year in January. But, you know, again, we had talked about, do we want to ask the voters to potentially put more surplus aside if we have a surplus to go into that? We do have a pretty healthy balance right now for Tracy Hall. I think over $500,000 there right now. So there was some significant amount of money that was appropriated last year, 570,000 even. So that is again it'll go quickly, I'm sure, based on what we decide we might want to do, but that's a meaningful amount of money set aside right now. The other thoughts that we had, again, for if we again receive our audit back, which Barry's been working with the auditors, we think we'll get that maybe a little earlier than we have in past years. We could look again at a potential tax relief if we were interested in looking at that. And then the Fund 50, again, I think at this point, we're comfortable that we're going to fall into the category there of I think it's 12 to 16% of our operating or our total budget is going to be held for that Fund 50 use. So Barry, that was kind of a ramble. Do you have any other things to mention about the other considerations?
Excuse me, no. I did just want to respond to Priscilla because she asked about the operations category. So wages and employer taxes and employer benefits were pulled out because that's where a lot of the increase is over last year. Operations is everything else except capital. So everybody's operations are a little different, but they're also very similar. So I hope that helps explain what that line item is.
Roger,
I have a couple of questions, but I see Priscilla has her hand.
Go ahead, Priscilla. Something I'm wondering about. We have a rough estimate from the Emerald Ash Borer people that it could cost between $750,000 to $2.25 million to deal with the Emerald Ash Borer problem. And I don't think we're budgeting, and I don't know where
Well, we haven't budgeted anything, and they are, I think, on the list of committees to come in and speak to the board.
That's a lot of money.
Well, that would be more than 6% of increase for sure. So yeah,
it's also not something we have to do in 1 year. We can spread it out over several years. So
I thought it was more urgent.
No, they're supposed to be triaging those things that are urgent so that those get taken care of first. And then, you know, this is something that will play out over several years. So we can budget for that accordingly.
Madam Chair,
yes.
You just made a pun.
What?
Triage.
Oh. Thank you, Mary, for catching that. Roger, did you still have questions?
Yes. So Barry, is the public safety operations the cost of running the public safety building?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's the same for Tracy Hall.
Yes.
Okay, so then if we're doing that, did we do that last year? Do we separate out public safety building and Tracy Hall from, say, town managers?
Well, it's separated out. Yeah, it's separated out in the budget historically.
Okay.
Just like emergency management is. Yeah.
Okay.
It has its own kind of category.
Okay, so what I might suggest, you can talk about this with Brennan, is the highway garage and did they call it the apparatus bay? The firehouse. I don't know how consistent then it is to talk about their facility in their operation budget. Like, should we also separate that out or potentially take all facilities and put it in a pool? That's a suggestion. Either way, I would like to see. Anyway, go ahead.
This is kind of a 30,000 foot view in the fire department category. Same with DPW. Those items are grouped because DPW has 3 different sections, right? For the highway,
right.
And
that's right.
Right. So this is just a lump sum, for them. So we could figure out where they were in relationship to the 6% increase. That detail is backup for all of this. When the budget is finalized, you will see all of that in detail.
Yeah, okay, so that makes sense. So the 9.51 for DPW, some of that might be the operations of the highway garage. It's not just the operations of you know what I mean? Like, just I'm trying to. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And then,
so if you refer back to the memo lists what is included in each. Like the town manager's office has got a lot of different categories in it, right? It's not just Brennan's office.
Sure.
So that might help answer some of those questions for you.
I mean, yes, but okay. I think I was just making the point that DPW in this percent increase is owning the highway garage in a way that the police department is not owning the public safety building in their increase, right?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So it's just budgets, it's their arguments, and this is making an argument, and that's all. And then my only other comment is to answer Brennan's question, which is I do not need to see a presentation from a department that has complied with the request, so to speak. That being said, we could, if they have, it's budget season is an opportunity to hear from departments, so they could maybe come at the end of a budget process. I wouldn't make any, I would prioritize the ones that have increases. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Roger. Brennan?
Well, I guess that was some of the guidance I'd like to leave tonight with is, do we want to ask so right now, the clerk, the listers are over the 6%. Police department is just over the 6%, and DPW is at 9.51, so a fair amount above. And I can tell you, at least in the police and the DPW, almost all of that is at the increase that was given to the CBA employees of 6.5% when that was approved, and the 22% healthcare increase that gets associated with each of those employees. So that's again, we've looked at these about 3 times with pretty sharp pencils and tried to figure out, is there any way we can get that down into that 6% category? And at this point, I think both the chief and Chris would be happy to come in and explain to the board how they really can't do that this year. But again, the overall increase is going to be still under that 6%. So,
well, I think part of some of these questions would be answered if we could see a detailed budget to see where these increases are coming. Just lumping them into these categories is giving us a 30,000-foot view, but I think we need to.
Well, that, if I may, so that's the other guidance that we're seeking here is, does the majority of the board want to see every detail here? Are people satisfied that this is being presented as requested with kind of an overview? And if the detail is needed, we would look at that individually by the department.
Marcia?
I guess there's going to be a lot of people looking closely at the budget this year. I mean, everybody's always concerned about where the taxes are going. And given the discussions that have happened so far, maybe it would be a good thing to look at everybody who's over 6%. I'm not interested in the fine details of every department because that's kind of what you and the departments do. You're the experts on that. So I would be in favor of that, of talking to the people with over 6%. And in terms of my other question, energy management, it's under by 83%. Is that going to be a problem?
Emergency.
That's because we paid off the tower bond.
Yeah, so that is the huge significant decrease because
For some reason, that's not been under debt service. It's been under emergency management. But that's because that $27,500 plus the interest is no longer being budgeted.
I was just worried about being bitten.
No,
that's good.
I think Lily has her.
Okay. Well, I have a few questions. You mentioned the surplus funds and typically take up the warrant articles in January to go on the town warrant. And I think this year we should make sure that we see the final audit before we determine what we're doing with any surplus funds. I think that's important because last year we got bit because we were kind of guesstimating. The other thing that I noticed in this is cemetery commission. The cemetery commission typically gets a $20,000 outside appropriation. They are not in our budget. So I would take them out of this consideration. They need to come to us with their appropriation request.
If I may, so the answer to that, Barry pointed out that it's very unusual that we have this kind of an appropriation for one of these groups, but we have to account for it. So again,
we account for them under outside appropriations. They're a warrant article unto themselves.
But we have to account for them in the fiscal audit.
Right, but they're not part of our budgeting process other than asking the voters to approve their appropriation.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing was, I'd like to see a schedule of the debt service. Like I said, that I know the tower was paid off, but I'd also like to see what do we have remaining and when are those items scheduled to be paid off. So those were my comments on the budget. I do want to see detail on all of the departments. I think it's just good oversight and accountability for us to look at what were the actual expenses last year, what are they requesting for this year, and just put our eyes on that kind of information. There are no other comments. We'll go. Priscilla, go ahead.
I also would be interested in the details because God's in the details. That's where you find. And presumably the departments have had to go through that exercise anyway to come up with a budget, right? So it should, I'm guessing it's not extra work for them.
It's all there. It's really, this is a question of what we were asked to kind of come back with a threshold, which we did.
Yeah, this is very helpful to start.
Of how this is publicly inspected, I guess, is something that comes together at the very end, unless the majority of the board wants to see it all in more detail as we go through the process. Again, my thought was this could be fairly straightforward and we can get through it, or we could look at each line item in detail. But we had really, I guess, gone out with our department heads trying to get to that 6% or under threshold, and they've done the work. So it's not that you can't see that at some point. It's just that, do we want to spend hours looking through this, or is this something that's been accomplished?
Well, my thinking is that fiscal oversight is our greatest responsibility, and I would like to see the details. Whether we spend hours in these meetings discussing those details is a totally different topic. But I think as board members, we should see the details and see what these departments are requesting and compare it to what was done in the previous year. So I would definitely want to see all of the detail as it is presented in the town report. Priscilla?
I agree, and I don't want to spend hours and hours in meetings on this. I think we have a responsibility to do our homework and study that stuff, which personally I might not be able to do between Friday night when the packet comes out and Wednesday night when the meeting is. But to address Marcia's comment that people are probably going to want to look at that budget pretty carefully this year, because everybody's feeling pinched. We want to know. And we will deflect criticism if we can be as possible.
Marcia, you want to make a comment?
Well, I would suggest there's nothing secret about that. It's just, I think that the people who have the expertise and who have done it, I'm happy to rely on it. Happy to have it in the packet as informational material. Unhappy to spend hours debating whether somebody bought too many pencils or wants to buy too many pencils. But I think in terms of our fiduciary duty, we ask for a certain amount of money. We have our staff does the work and monitors all of this, which is what we pay them to do. And we can look at the five departments that came up over the 6,000 and just take a little time with that in an open meeting so that people understand and can ask questions about why that had to be more than 6%, and people in town can feel more comfortable about the costs.
And I think the only way we can do that is if we see the detail and understand what went into those increases that went above the 6% guideline. So I mean,
what I said.
We're going to see this budget in the town report. So why not show it to us before it gets to the point where it's being published?
I have one question.
Yes.
So the on capital, there's one thing that I struggle with on capital, and maybe this in the budget presentations, it could address this problem I have, which is we have a capital budget plan, right? Like, to my knowledge, like the bridges are often named and their allocations are appropriated in each fiscal year. And so we can rely on that for planning. I think where I struggle is where I hear, like Brennan made the comment, well, we have this much money in the bridge fund, the reserve fund for the bridges, so we could handle that expense. And my question is always, was that allocation planned for in the capital plan? And so I understand that it's a living document and things get reordered in order to accommodate something that's more pressing. But I think I would want that addressed, where is the capital allocations that are outlined here at a high level, are they meeting everything that was anticipated from last year, or what is new from this budget process? Like, what got changed? So again, like, I don't need to see a listing of all the bridges, and I don't want to talk about what bridge is necessary to fund. I just want to know what got altered in this budget process from the document that was presented last year. Does that make sense?
Right, I think that's a fair question. If we're going to, whatever it costs to do more lane bridge, if we take it out of this fund, then we're obviously postponing work on a different bridge. And, what can be postponed? are there other priorities that we have to deal with? And so we may not have enough money in this fund to do everything that needs to be done in the next fiscal year. Brendan, I see your hand.
I was just going to say, I think some of your questions, Roger, and I'm sure others have questions about the capital budget. So we didn't go into that in any detail. That was what I was thinking we would probably do at the next meeting, was focus more on the capital. I'd like to, if we could, decide how we want to handle the kind of finalizing of the operation. If the decision is we want to have department heads above 6% come in and talk with the board or explain this in more detail, we need to let people know that, especially with the holiday week that week. So does that seem reasonable that we would tackle in specific detail those over 6%? That shouldn't be a long discussion, I don't think, and then spend the rest of the budget discussion talking about the capital budget.
Do you think the capital budget information could be ready for the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't we work on capital budget on November 26th, and then we'll look at some of these departments over 6% in the December meetings. We have the 11th and the 18th. And that would give more time for these department heads to tell you what meeting, what nights they could be available.
Okay. Barry, do you have thoughts on that? I know we were kind of hoping to kind of move this, right? So if we could get the operational side completed on the 26th, that was our thought. Then you have one less thing to come back to. But
well, I don't think we can do all of those on the night of the 26th. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I know one of those departments would not be available that night. Because I know that I'm covering.
Let's divide them up.
It's fine. If we want to push this to the 11th, it's not a big deal. I'd rather do it all.
Or maybe we could do a couple on the 26th.
And I was, again, not envisioning hours of discussion, because I think most of this can be pretty well explained, and you're going to see when you look at the actual detail of those budgets that there's not much there to cut at this point.
So when will we see that detail?
Well, we were going to
will that be in?
26. If we're going to look at these individual departments above 6%, then that would be their chance to say, here's each of those detailed reports, and let people look at that. I'd like people to come into those meetings really prepared to say, I get it or I don't get it. If you get it, let's move on. If it's a real question, let's ask the department heads to kind of defend why they're at that level. And I think that's easily done.
I think this could be, I think the entire budget process can be done in 2 more meetings.
Yeah, I kind of think that too.
I want to move.
Out of Norwich?
I guess I'm trying to figure out exactly what this means in terms of setting the agenda. Are we going to deal with just operation budgets next time?
Well, why don't we do this, if I may? So last year we put an hour at the beginning of every meeting to do budgets. And I think we could give a half hour to the operational and a half hour on the capital. And if we're not done with either of those, or if we don't be done with the capital, maybe then that would carry over on to the 11th. But we might need to do that after, I think 6:30 might be the time to do the Stantec while we have kind of an earlier window there. I'd hate to make them wait until 8 o'clock to do their presentation.
On the 26th.
On the 26th.
Right. So yeah, we have.
So again, those 2 topics.
And if we're also going to do public comments, we're looking at least an hour for the Stantec and possibly more.
I would give ourselves at least an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes. So that would be with just those 2 topics, and the warrants and whatever else we need to get done. Probably a 2.5 to 3 hour meeting right there. So we might want to be cognizant of not a whole lot of other discussion that's not absolutely necessary.
Right. Well, looking at this, I see public safety is the largest increase. which, Roger, by the way, public safety is the fire and police department facility. It's the public safety building. So it has two departments. That's why it's segregated away from the fire department or the police department, because it is a shared facility. So we have that. The next highest one is the listers. I know that the chair of the listers will not be available that night because she's also the treasurer and I'm covering for her on a treasurer issue. So we can't do the listers on the 26th. DPW 9.51%. That's the next one. So maybe we have DPW and police come in on the 26th. And we can cover the public safety building, DPW and police department that night. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Why would you be covering? It's not a compatible position to do any treasurer work as a chair of a select board.
I am an assistant treasurer for Dresden. I cannot be an assistant treasurer in Norwich, but I can be in Dresden.
God.
So I'm covering on the Dresden side of things. So 26th, we would be doing public safety, DPW, and police. And then on the 11th, we could do listers, town clerk, and is there another one? No, I guess that's it, listers and town clerk. Roger, go ahead.
I don't understand. So this is what Brennan said in the end. We're going to do the operating budget for departments that have more than 6% next meeting, and we're going to get to a capital at the same time. And if there's any additional time, we'll do it the next one, except I guess Cheryl will be the next time because she's not available. Is that what I'm understanding?
Right. Well, I think if we do police, DPW, and public safety on the 26th, along with the Stantec report and public comments on that, that will probably eat up a good share of our time. Then we would put the town clerk and the listers on for discussion on December 11. I don't know if we would have time to cover capital budget on the 26th. We would have to see if that made sense. We can put it on the agenda and then table it.
I'd like to put it on, and if we don't get to it, we'll bump it.
Okay. We can always table it if things start running really late. Okay. All right, I think we have a plan. Lily was there. I don't know if she went away because I didn't get to her. Lily, are you still with us?
I am. Hi. I wanted to just point out to you guys that 92% of my budget, and my entire budget is 4% of the total town budget, is for salary and benefits. So, well, I'm happy to come before you on the 11th and explain to you what the other 8% of my budget is used for, including, elections and Board of Civil Authority and Board of Abatement. I mean, I guess if that's what you want me to do, that's what I'll do. So,
well, this is why I'd like to see the details.
Sure.
Maybe the details will show us that, we're fine with what you've got here. But until we see the details, we can't really know that.
I think Brennan's point, though, Pam, is that you're going to really want to spend most of your time on capital, and that the operating budget is pretty self-effacing, and it should be done because we're diligent and want to look at it closely. But we should be spending more on capital. We shouldn't be spending time on operating, right, Brennan?
Right. And we have December 11th and the 18th if we don't cover it on the 26th of November. So we have plenty of time to get to those details, I'm sure.
Does anybody want it? But does anybody want to do that? I don't want to do that. What does everyone else think?
Marcia, you want to make a comment?
I did. First, I'll answer Roger. I'm not too I'm not concerned about the operational because I trust the work that's been done, and the ones that came in over 6%, just to make sure Lily understands, I think this is as much to be completely transparent for people in the community. This is why these things have to be over 6%, okay? And I think it would be beneficial to couch it on the agenda, such as, you know, we're going to be talking to people, departments who have budgets over the 6% direction of the select board. And then people have notice and, you know, they can say, all right, I can plan to spend time to listen to this because I'm concerned about the budget. It's just transparency as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, any other comments? Seeing none, I think we should move on to the next item on the agenda.
I don't understand why we heard Brennan's recommendation and then you rewrote how the recommendation should be. And I suppose our silence of the majority is that we'll just do that. I heard clearly that Brennan wanted to do a half hour for operating, spend the rest of the time on capital, and then spend the next meeting on capital. And then you came up with a different plan and we all sat there and accepted it. So as long as other people know what happened and they're fine with it, I'm fine. But like you just rewrote the town manager's recommendation and we were just like, cool.
No, I don't think I did. I don't think I did. The select board wants to talk to department heads that are over 6%. There are 3 of them that I suggested we cover at the next meeting. And we'll also add capital budget. Hopefully we'll have time to do that. Along with the Stantec report and public comments on that. And then I suggested that we do the final 2 departments, listers and town clerk, on December 11th. I didn't see any pushback, so I thought that I was
I'm
coming
shocked.
up with a plan that was acceptable.
I'm just pointing out that we're going with what you said and not what the town manager advised.
I thought I was summarizing what we were all agreeing to. Am I wrong?
Maybe I don't have ears. That's fine.
Marcia?
I mean, maybe what we need is a straw poll or something. I don't want to spend a lot of time on the operational budget. In terms of the people that are over 6%, I think it's reasonable to have that transparency, to have them explain it. But I do think we need to spend the majority of our time on the capital budget.
Mary?
What she said. I agree with what Marcia just said.
Okay. Priscilla?
I think that is the plan, that we need to do our homework before we come to the meeting. So we know if we have particular questions, we do hear from those people, and we also try to deal with the operations budget. I think we're actually in agreement.
I think we are in agreement. I'm not sure why Roger thinks we're not.
Not in agreement. You put it into 2 sessions because Cheryl Lindbergh's not available at the time that we're going to talk about the operating.
Well, you can't talk to the listers about their budget if you don't have the listers in present.
There's more than one lister. I just want the record to state that you divided the plan for the operation budget around Cheryl Lindbergh's schedule. And that's fine if you want to do that, but that's definitely what happened. I'm like, what the heck?
And you're going to cover 5 budgets in 30 minutes?
I think that's what the town manager suggested we could do. And I agree with him.
Brennan, do you have a problem with pushing the listers in the town?
I think at this point, I think what you've presented is probably the simplest way to go forward. So
thank you.
And I don't know that we will spend more than, again, I don't know where this is going to go. I would think 5 minutes, if everybody's done their homework with each department head, might suffice. So it might move very quickly.
Okay.
And clarification.
Sure.
So we have all agreed we're not going to spend a lot of time, if any time, on the operational budget, other than those 3 departments that we can see.
Right. On November 26th, we're going to cover police, DPW, and public safety. On December 11, town clerk and the listers. And on the 26th, we will also allow time for the capital budget. And that will depend on how late everybody's willing to stay to work on that, or whether we wish to table some of it or all of it to the next meeting. I don't rule by fiat. I just try to guide us through the process.
Budget season.
I mean, I think the point, and then I'll stop, is that some people do control the operations of the town, and we let them do that to live and let live. And maybe in America today, we should stop that. All right, I'm done.
Good, thank you. All right, number 11, correct the term expiration on the Finance Committee appointee. As I said at the last meeting, we were appointing him for a 3-year term, and then we had the term ending in 1 year. So if we could pass a motion to make this a full 3-year term, and then we could ask Brennan's office to send out a revised appointment letter. So would someone like to make a motion? Marcia, go ahead.
I would suggest that the motion shouldn't say move to appoint because he's already been appointed. It should say something more like I move to correct the appointment of Russell North.
Okay, would you like to make that motion?
I move to correct the appointment of Russell North to the Norwich Finance Committee for a 3-year term ending June 30, 2027.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mary. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, unanimous, thank you. Okay, the next item is rescind the sexual harassment policy dated October 9 of 2019. As Brennan stated in an earlier meeting, the new personnel policy covers this. So we don't want to have competing policies. So does anyone have any comments or questions about this? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move to rescind the sexual harassment policy dated October 9th, 2019.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, unanimous. Okay, we have a new number 13. And that is related to the allegation of an open meeting law violation that we have received. And the motion was to discuss whether it was appropriate for the chair to reach out to town council for advice on this allegation. Marcia?
Well, it's been our practice to have the town manager do it. And I'm just wondering how many requests for documents or for that document was received by the town manager, and what actually, and how many you sent out.
I don't understand what you asked him.
Oh, the town manager's contract for 2025. I'm wondering how many requests we had for that document to the town manager's office and how many were sent out.
Okay. This isn't about the town manager's contract. This is about an allegation of open meeting law violation. And so we have the allegation here. And the question is, do we want to get legal advice I believe that having the town manager reach out to town council regarding this, given the topic, might be viewed as a conflict of interest. And so my request is that the board authorize me as the chair to discuss this allegation with town council and the best way to proceed to deal with the allegation.
Well, I know you said conflict of interest. I don't know whose interest is being conflicted. I looked at our policy. I don't understand what you're concerned about.
The town council works for the select board, the town of Norwich, not the town manager.
So then everything that he's been talking to the town council about, he shouldn't have been talking to them about?
If we want to delegate that responsibility to him, we can. But since this is regarding an amendment to a contract with the town manager, the town council would be representing the select board in this.
Well, you just said that it wasn't about the contract. It was about an open meeting law violation. So I think the town manager, as our employee, has routinely dealt with town council. And that's been something that we've said to committees because we didn't want everybody and his brother going to town council. We wanted to have things vetted. So I don't see that there's any conflict of interest, that this is actually a consistent policy that we have always had, and this would be a weird deviation.
And you've never dealt with the town council as chair? You never reached out?
Manager, I definitely did.
And when we did have a town manager, you never did?
If they called me.
Well, I think we need legal advice. And so I need to understand how the board would like to seek that legal advice. Marcia?
I'd like the town manager to do what he always does and call.
Priscilla?
I think given the prickliness of this issue, it would probably be advisable to have the chair do this so that nobody can say we're trying to do something nefarious by having someone. I just think it's cleaner if it's the chair in this case.
All right, thank you. Roger?
The only one who suggested something nefarious has happened is the chair herself. I think the chair reaching out is a conflict. Like, let's just keep with our practice and letting town manager deal with council. Also, we have a dossier of these things. He might not even need to consult with council based on his own judgment and review of past materials. So let's just do what we normally do. And again, I think we have to be careful when we suggest, there's no reason to believe that there is anything nefarious at play. He's reaching out to council on an alleged violation of a law.
Would someone like to make a motion?
I move to direct the town manager to contact the town council about the alleged open meeting law violation we have received.
I'll second it.
Okay, so it's a motion by Callaway, second by Layton. Okay, all right, any further comments or questions? Mary?
I would like something further to come out of this without getting into the actual content of the allegation, but I'm interested in whether the amount of information that would be proper to let the town know about or not. You know, and I think sometimes as a group, we make a public statement about a decision that we've made, especially if we've been in executive session. And clearly we did not do that this time. So, and it may not be a violation of the law, but I do think that the town probably wants to know what went on. And there's some kind of balance there that I don't have a very good judgment about. And I don't know if that's a legal question or just a question of being very clear about the practice and very consistent about what we do. So I'm just going to leave that like this. Does that make sense?
Well, I think that's part of the advice that probably should be coming from council. As I read this allegation, it's that. Do you want to read it?
We weren't going to get into. Were we going to get into the content?
Right. I think I'm not sure that your interpretation of what the allegation is correct, but we'll run it by council and see what comes back.
And I'm not saying that I have any interpretation of, you know, what the allegation is. I'm just saying as a general principle, when we go into executive session, what do we need the public to know? That, I mean, sometimes there's just can't say anything, but are there circumstances where a statement is appropriate after we come out? That's all I'm saying. And to be clear about when that is appropriate and when it's not. Because sometimes I'm not really sure. As a general thing, not, you know, this sort of sparks it a little bit. But as Roger says, you know, we have had allegations in the past, you know, and I've been involved in at least one myself where I knew I had to cure it. And so, you know, curing is fine. If you need to do that, it's like, okay, made an inadvertent mistake. This is what it is. Try not to do it again. But it's tough if they come up over and over again, and it's something that we're leaving out, you know, that we're just neglecting to do, either from lack of consistency or we're just tired that night or something. So I just want our practice to be really good.
Okay, so, Marcia?
Well, I think if you read the law carefully, it answers most of those questions. And obviously certain things like, you know, certain personnel issues can't be disclosed.
Yes, that's so what I was wondering. Personnel is the consideration.
Right. But I still am going to ask my question. Who sent out how many of, there were requests for that document, and I'd like to know who sent them out, how many were sent out.
Who are you asking?
Well, I think that's a question that Brennan can answer for you later. I don't think he has that information at his fingertips.
Do you?
I guess I'm a little confused of what document we're talking about. The actual amendment to the town manager's contract.
Yeah.
I believe we sent that out to the Valley News reporter. I think that was the only request we had out of the town manager's office.
So did you send it any, Pam?
Is this an interrogation? This is a question.
Well, didn't Brennan just answer it?
Well, I'm just wondering if Pam sent anything to anybody.
I did.
Well,
I had a public document request.
Well, you don't get those, he does.
Where is that stated?
That's our policy.
Really? Okay. All right, we have a motion on the table to direct the town manager to contact town council regarding the open meeting law violation allegation that we have received. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Priscilla?
No.
Roger?
Yes.
I'm a no. Okay.
If I may, to be very clear and transparent, I am being tasked with asking for guidance from town council about the open meeting law violation.
Do you have a copy of this?
Yeah, I will be responding back to the full select board once I get that guidance so that everyone can see that.
Right.
I just want to be very clear about how this is going to be handled.
I'm going to say that one more time. You're being tasked to ask town council.
As the motion just stated, I'm now the conduit to the town council related to this open meeting law violation complaint. When I have a response back from town council, I will be forwarding that to the board, or I will have the attorney reach out directly to the board with their answer to the question.
Okay. All right, that takes care of number 13. Number 14, receipt of correspondence.
I have a question. Is there an opportunity for the other person who sent correspondence, namely me, to speak to the correspondence, which is item 13?
We renumbered.
It got shifted to 14 because
Oh, really?
we haven't got
I have an updated copy.
Yeah, at the beginning of the meeting, we added a new 13 and moved everything else down. So now we're down on 14, receipt of correspondence. And yours is the first item under correspondence. And so we do have a request from Mr. McCabe to possibly reclassify Meeting House Road as a Class 4 road. And he's here if the board would like to hear from him. And also I would like to know if the board would like to make this a future agenda item before we move on to the next correspondence. So would you like to hear from Mr. McCabe?
I would like to hear from him.
Okay. You want to come up and introduce yourself and why you're here?
Don McCabe, Meeting House Road. Excuse my mistaken identities. I had switched your roles at the beginning of the evening, calling you Madam Chair.
That's because it was in the Valley News. We thought you were being facetious.
Oh, okay. I was being facetious. We have a road that we've owned for 37 years, Meeting House Road, and it is 1,775 feet long. It's a very patriotic road, and it is. It has an agreement among all of the people who live on the road. 8 families live on the road with children. And we all use the road. We have an agreement that was drawn up by DeMules, and it's in their deed. However, the burden of expense largely falls on my wife and I as the owners of the road. And so we end up spending a lot more money than we want to. And that has stimulated some questions of other road owners in the area. Now, Douglas Road is Class 4, so that's treated a little differently, we understand. And Ladue Road is Class 4, that's treated differently. But Meeting House Road, Bramble Lane, Barbara Lee Lane, and a few others are private. And so the expense falls to the owners. They normally divvy up expenses pro rata for everybody, and that has worked. But now our road, being 37 years old, needs culverts. It has the old steel culverts. We need plastic with the smooth interiors. And it's going to cost a lot of money. I was wondering if we cannot reclassify the road then as a Class 4 road, which entitles it to maintenance from the town. Is the town, or does the town have a policy of helping road owners replace culverts through the DPW, for example? And I don't know who knows about this, but that's my question.
I can try to answer that. So as you state, the Class 4 roads have a level of service that the town provides, which is bridges and culverts. I think if I'm understanding your note, this is a private driveway right now that services your home and other homesteads off of that.
Right.
So at this point, I don't think we've ever had any upkeep or obligation to upkeep. So you're asking, would the town if this was a class 4 road, be responsible? And the answer is yes. If it became a class 4 road, the town becomes probably responsible for replacing undersized culverts or the basic maintenance there.
Right.
In the situation it is now, the town does not have any responsibility for that.
Has the town, to your knowledge, reclassified any private roads to class 4 roads in the interest of the people who live on the road?
So in my short tenure, 23 months, no, I don't have any real past history off the top of my head about that. I suspect that has not happened recently, but I would guess ask people that have been involved in the town government longer than I.
Marcia?
So I'm in a similar situation. Our road dates from 1983, and the 5 owners pay for everything, and we've got culverts that we have to replace. So I feel your pain. We have to have it regraded, and we also have our own septic system. So, but we like it, so we pay for it. And I think that one of the things I'd be concerned about, you mentioned a few other private roads. So I think it would be a precedent that we have to really talk about.
Yeah, I'm a pragmatist and I cannot see it happening, converting a private road into a class 4 road for the sake of the residents, because it opens up the town to great expense. And, you know, we understand that. But does the town offer any assistance to private road owners in terms of culvert replacement, for example, which the town routinely does, and they do it very well? We would, and we may have to contract out to a private contractor, which, as you can imagine, is going to be very expensive. So if there's a lending hand that is available from the DPW, we would take advantage.
Oh, if that's directed at me, I appreciate the request, and I understand why that would be in your interest. I would not be able to say tonight that the DPW is going to be able to, you know, maintain or refurbish a private culvert. I don't think there's anything that's
Marcia, go ahead. If you have a private road and you tried to get a grant, because we have to get grants for culvert work, I don't think we could, as a town, request a grant to do work on a private road, could we?
Probably not. I think, I mean, we have, as we've talked about, different levels of culvert projects, right? And we have operating budgets that pay to replace smaller culverts throughout the year. That's part of the DPW duty. Then we have like the FEMA big culverts there that we're talking about $1.3 million to do. So some of the monies that flow into that are grant monies and some are taxpayer monies, but they're all used for the same types of
town road
culvert repair or other repair.
Yeah. Priscilla?
I think I'm remembering that when we discussed putting the temporary bridge and then a permanent bridge on the road, whose name I forget, but that goes off the Crooked Half Mile. Horsington's. Yeah, to rather. Excuse me. I thought there was some mention that if we could have found in the records who built the bridge, that person would have been responsible for replacing the bridge. In other words, if the homeowner had put it in, the homeowner would have been responsible. We couldn't find any records. And we decided that because we couldn't find any such records and to be compassionate, that the town would replace that bridge.
But that bridge is also pretty much in the town right of way as well.
Oh, that makes a difference? Oh, these are details I don't know.
A good portion of it, maybe not all of it, but a good portion of it is in the town right of way. That's one of the other considerations.
So Roger's had his hand up.
Roger?
I just think a future agenda item should be like some education to us around culverts and like culvert policy. Like we I feel like we've had 4 different situations on culverts this year, and each of them have been treated differently. And so I don't even want to, I just think that we should get a little bit of education about what the historical practice has been and then develop a policy so we can communicate effectively to residents, because we do something different for driveway culverts than we do with private road culverts, ? Like, I would like to know more and then have a policy.
Okay, well, I don't think it's something that we can do while we're in the middle of budget season, but maybe something we can put it on our list of future discussion items.
I think so, but we're also budgeting for culverts. So what culverts are we budgeting for? So I think Chris can like address this on a high level, and then so maybe Brendan can advise. But yeah, anyway, but thanks.
Okay. Yeah, I can't see who it is.
Heidi Lockwood has her.
Oh.
Yeah, Heidi is with us. She's one of the residents of Meeting House Road. Hi, Heidi.
Okay, Heidi, go ahead. Please introduce yourself.
My day Meeting House Road, and I'm here to support Don's letter. I also want to add that there is a history in town of converting roads, private roads, to town highways if they met one of 3 conditions. And one of those is that they connect to trails, which, you know, certainly is the case of Meeting House. There's a large system of trails in the property around Meeting House. We have runners and hikers and all kinds of things come through. And then the other is the density. And, you know, it shifted from the density factor to 11 houses on a road, or, you know, lots/units is the word that's actually used. And I just want to kind of challenge and question that, because, you know, of course you could have a 5-mile long road with 11 houses that the town would take over under the current policies. Meanwhile, we have a road that's less than 2,000 feet. And there are you know, certainly 9 lots/units on the road. You know, it's providing us with an incentive to, for example, subdivide, which I don't think anybody wants, right? So, you know, I guess what I'm trying to suggest here is that I'd like to see a reasoned discussion about about returning to the density requirement. And the density requirement used to be the length of the road times 2. I think it was divided by, or sorry, the length of the road times the number of houses on the road divided by 2. We can get that too. And, you know, I mean, a density factor of 400 would be reasonable in present day Norwich.
Okay, and it's clarification. Can I ask you, what document are you citing to?
So the document for, I can drop it in the chat here if you like. The document that is the policy, let me get the full name of it.
Is it on our website?
Yes, it's on the website, and it's called the Norwich Norwich Codification. It's on the Norwich .vt.us website.
Norwich Codification of what?
It's a Part 1 administrative legislation. It doesn't have a title. It's just this table of contents, Part 1, administrative and general legislation, and it's on page 30 of that document. Is the section that talks about 11 houses. We have a 2001 document that refers to the density condition that I mentioned. So, you know, I think we should return to the density condition. But as Roger was mentioning, I also think there's, you know, the question of, particularly given that we've had so many heavy rains, you know, Don, who is not 28 anymore. 82 has been, just heroically out there with the machines and fighting the elements. And just at some point, it's not doable. I think what he's asking for is quite reasonable. It's just for some help under the weather conditions, and given the age of the road. I can't contract out, yes, but I think that we're looking at a problem that, you suggested this might be true of other roads. Perhaps that's something that we need to gather information from residents before we jump to the assumption that it is true.
Okay, thank you. Could you forward any documents that you have to the town manager and he could share them with us so that we can consider?
I can't do that. We could put them in the next packet.
Right.
I have one other question.
I can just share them with the select.
Roger?
And then we have a culvert inventory that we paid for. I think it was done by TRORC. My question would just be, are culverts on private roads a part of that inventory? So
I don't think so.
So I mean, however our DPW and town manager want to inform us on culverts for the development of a policy would be cool.
Well, it sounds like we have some document that if she could share that with the town manager, then it could be in the next packet so that we can look at that and decide when it's appropriate to put it on an agenda. Mary, you had a question?
The situation for me sort of brings up more zoning and development questions, which I don't know is our purview, but things like the density. Also, if a road is developed and there's several residencies there, who's responsible looking into the future? I mean, they'll always talk about fire access, can you get fire engines into new houses? But it also is a thing. I mean, I think it's tough to look ahead 30 years when you first put it in, there's an expense, you get it all organized, but then the wear and tear sort of creeps up. And also the cost of materials creeps up. But whether that's the responsibility of the town or not, I think is a whole, it's a different question. But I think for any new developments, I think it's kind of a good question. It's huge. It is huge. And also with the storms that we get, that is huge also, that the culverts may not be sized correctly anymore for the storms that we get. So that impacts the private areas as well as the ones that the town has to pay for. So, yeah.
Well, I thank you for your time and interest. And if there is ever a surplus in the budget, culverts, think culverts.
We do. We have 1,000 that we own.
Right. What's the name of your road?
Hobson Lane.
Yeah, and it's throughout, the whole road is private?
Private.
Yeah, but at least it's flat.
It's flat and nice.
Yep.
But we paid for it.
Okay. All right. Next item of correspondence. I had sent an email to Brennan based on a question that Priscilla brought up, and I had the same question, which is how can we have $2 million more of actual revenue from property tax than what we budgeted? And the response was that this actual number incorporates the school taxes that we also collect and send on to the schools. Okay. Next item is the notice of a public hearing that took place on November 7th for the Development Review Board. It was a pavilion at the school, so that's already been held. Police Department letter to Dr. Mello was provided to us by Chris Clement at the last meeting, along with a state statute. See the next thing. with the appointment of Dr. Gemignani as the town health officer, I have submitted my resignation to the Vermont Commissioner of Health as a town health officer. That felt good. Okay, the next item is from Marcia regarding animals in Norwich. She provides a lot of information about the animal control ordinance and things that may need to be changed when that is reviewed.
I think the point was to just let everybody know that we really at some point need to think about the different options. There's a menu of things that we could put in our ordinance, and so.
Right, and Brennan will be working with the police chief on that, so I'm sure they'll take these things into consideration. I did note that you mentioned that there was a motion to pay Dr. Finello. That actually was not a motion, and I covered that in my suggested corrections for the minutes. And there was no motion to direct the town manager to work with the police chief on the animal control ordinance, but it's reflected in the minutes that they will be doing that work. Okay, the next item is this is regarding a property on McKenna Road that apparently received some fill from Dartmouth College that had a high level of I don't know, PAH, whatever that is. Anyway, the corrective action letter was sent to us, so that's.
I went to that hearing in January. It was right here. It's very interesting because it's something that is, you can find it in the parking lot anywhere. It's everywhere.
The substance.
Right, but this was at a level that was beyond the Vermont standard, and so it's, the final letter said that they're not going to take any further action, but if somebody wanted to dig a foundation in that property, they had to get some approval of what needed to be done in order to put in a foundation.
I read it. I just, and at the time I sent information to Brennan because, again, that goes to development issues.
I mean, would you need to have a permit to bring in fill from somewhere else in Norwich? I don't even know the answer to that.
I know you can't bring firewood across state lines.
That's probably more insect infestation.
Yeah, but this is bringing in contaminated soil. So, yeah, it gets a little dicey. Anyway, then the next document is Marcia's current version of the handbook. We should all read that and look for the things that she's pointed out tonight that she added, like on page 5, the housekeeping items.
And I'll be putting together that to-do list so that at some point when we're finished with the handbook, we could maybe look at that.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. All right, and then we have a letter from Marcia on capital budget planning that was directed to the town manager. Is there anything here, Marcia, that you wanted to point out about this?
Well, Jan had talked to me about he was going to put in he discussed it with you, and he was going to put in a request for appointing a subcommittee. And this is just an explanation about what the law says about how those capital budgets, everybody throws around the term capital budget, but in statute, as I explained here, I don't have to regurgitate it all if you've all read it. But basically, it's a term of art, and it's in the wheelhouse of the planning commission, and then they bring it there to develop it so that the town plan has capital projects. And once you have capital projects that need budgets, then they put together a budget that comes to the select board after going on the back here. And then the town plan, submit the town plan to the select board for approval. And that misses all the steps about public comments and hearings, and then they prepare the capital budget and program to enact the capital projects identified in the approved town plan and submit that budget to the select board for approval.
But that's not the way we've been doing capital budgeting.
No, I don't. That's what I mean. I don't want to use the word sloppy, but capital budgets mean different things to different people, right? So for big ticket items and the way Barry describes capital, that's a certain type of capital. If you're talking about capital budgeting for under the statutes, then that's about what's in the town plan. And the planning commission by statute puts that together. When I was first on the select board, I was very confused about capital budgeting because it was being used in all these different ways. So that's why I talked to the VLCT, and that's the quote that I put in here. That basically, if you're going to effectuate the implementation of a municipal plan, then you can have it, but it's only legally required if a town seeks to impose impact fees on new development in town. So I guess if you're talking about the capital budgets that we're going to be talking about next week, that's not this creature. This statutory creature is about capital budgets related to the town plan.
Okay, so if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, that's if we're looking at building contractors who want to come in and say, put in a subdivision, like when I lived in Virginia, they had to come with proffers and say, we're prepared to put in these roads and this infrastructure and all of these things. And it's going to add so many dollars for each building, each home that we build in this subdivision. So that's the kind of thing that impact fees are. They impact development of the land, where what we're talking about in the budgeting process is, are we going to buy a new grader or a new truck or a new police cruiser, or
which is not this creature.
Which is not this creature. So then it begs the question, do we need this creature?
Well, eventually, when the town plan gets amended, whenever that is, if they list things that they want to do, I go back to sidewalks everywhere, right? Then that's where they come to us and say, okay, we want sidewalks everywhere and we want a capital budget of this amount. Will you approve it?
Okay. So the next thing in the packet is a memorandum from Jan, based on a conversation that I had. He wants to get a conversation going with the select board on capital planning. But when I look at the form that was submitted, it says the parent board, commission, or committee would be the select board. And I was a little confused by that. Is that a correct interpretation of this capital planning group or committee or whatever you want to call it would be for the purposes under the statute? Would that be a select board? That to me would be a regular committee, not a subcommittee.
Planning commission puts together the town plan. Town plan dictates what is a capital budget. Do you know about this?
Well, I think what Jan is suggesting deviates from what you put into the packet as far as the planning commission's responsibilities and roles here. So what Jan is talking about is creating like a ad hoc committee or some other form of a committee that would talk about capital budgets that would include, it looks like, planning commission members that have already been appointed onto this non-existent committee right now. So I'm not quite sure how this would work. I tend to agree with Marcia that if this is a discussion about a capital budget that would be related to the infrastructure of the town, which I think is what Jan is trying to do, then it wouldn't be more appropriate for it to be part of the planning commission that would create that. They could ask for assistance and help from others to come onto that, working group and help them. But it would have to be published in the town plan, as Marcia mentioned about the statute, and then come back to the board as here's a formalized plan and here's a budget that goes with it, and the select board would have to determine whether they would fund that or not.
Okay, so at this point, would it be proper for you to have that conversation with Jan and try to?
Yeah, I think
to
again,
clarify for him how.
I think it probably doesn't belong in the select board realm quite yet.
Okay. All right, so if you could have that conversation with Jan, that would be good to help him understand how that works. All right, that's the end of correspondence. Would someone like to make a motion to receive the correspondence?
I move to accept all correspondence.
Thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you. Okay, no questions or comments? Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, unanimous. Thank you. Okay, approval of the October 23rd minutes. I submitted an email requesting 2 corrections. The first one was saying that the select board committed to finishing the budget by December 18, and that I went back and listened to the tape, and at the end we agreed that that would be a goal, and that we would add extra meetings if we needed to. And then the second one was about the animal control ordinance. Brennan asked the board if they wish to pay the invoice submitted by River Road Veterinary Clinic for the impoundment of a cat, and the majority supported payment of that invoice. There was no mention of that in the minutes, so I thought that was important to capture. So I would any comments about that?
My only comment, just I'm looking at the item 9 there. So I don't remember December 4th being a consideration. I thought we were trying to do it all.
Right, that was what was in the minutes, and so my correction would be that we agreed to
By December
try to finish it by December 18 if possible, and add extra meetings as needed. We didn't really set any specific dates.
Make that clear.
Yeah.
So I think that's a worthwhile amendment. Both amendments are.
All right, thank you. Okay. So would someone like to make a motion?
I move to approve the October 23rd, 2024 minutes as amended.
And that would be to incorporate
amendments by select board chair.
Okay, is there a second?
Do you want to cite?
Say what they were?
Well, no, maybe just say an email dated 11/7.
Oh, that's true. Let's see. That's a good way to do this. Amendments by the select board chair expressed in the email of, does it have a date?
November 7th. It's at the top there, right below my name.
Email of November 7th.
It's expressed in the email of November 7th.
Okay, all right. So that's moved by Mary. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, seeing no comments or questions. Mary, how do you vote?
Oh, yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Priscilla? Yes. Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, unanimous. Thank you. Okay. All right, the next thing is an AP warrant number 1199 that's in the packet. I would note that this is a large amount that we're approving, and part of it is because we have a large payment to the state education fund, like $1 million. So would someone like to make a motion to approve the warrant?
I move to approve AP warrant number 1199 in the amount of $1,082,960.42 to be paid from the general fund.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Right, seeing no questions or comments, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, unanimous. Okay, and then the last thing in the packet, because we were through. Yeah, it's here. Thank you for reminding me. Next thing in the packet are some warrants that I signed. There were 3 weeks between the meetings. And so I signed some off-cycle warrants that are here in the packet for information. And that is everything we had on the agenda. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second. Okay. Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I'm a yes, unanimous. We are adjourned at 9:25. 9:25.
Recording stopped.
Take it.
Okay.
The ordinance that she was talking about private roads.